About time that I get back into portrait painting. Okay, we're in here because it's raining outside and it is really loud in the studio right now. Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be painting a portrait, and this is not something I've done on the channel yet, and honestly, it's not something I've done in quite a while. In the last maybe year and a half since I graduated college, I've probably only painted like 2 portraits. I did a master copy of a Frederick Leighton painting, and that was probably about a year ago, and then I painted a portrait of my husband afterwards to kind of just see if I learned anything and see how I could apply it to my own portrait. So that's really all I've done. I've been doing a lot of really practical painting. I've been doing a lot of landscape paintings. I've been doing a lot of commissioned work and things that I could sell, things that I could give as gifts, things I could put up in my house. Like, that's kind of more the realm in which I've been painting for the last year or so. But now that I have a place to talk about my process and share with you like what I want to learn and what I'm thinking about, I feel like I actually have a place to get back into portrait painting. I drew a lot growing up and I made art in smaller ways growing up, but I don't think I really painted a full portrait, you know, with the intention of like it being a work of art until I was in college. And I mean, maybe my senior year of high school. Like, I was a little older, and I really loved it. I feel like I started doing it and I really had a draw to get better at it. And I've been trying to figure out how to be better and better at it over the years. And so because I've taken such a long break from it, I just feel like it's really about time that I get back into portrait painting. And I'm not like already perfect at this by any means. Like, I'm not necessarily the authority on portrait painting. Like, I'm not teaching you how to do it necessarily. I'm more just bringing you along with me to figure out how to do it together, and I hope you have fun with me learning how to improve and trying to maybe test out a few different techniques or sit through my thought process with me on this specific portrait and how I can rethink the skills that I already have and build on them. So I already have a reference photo taken for this, and we are going to be doing a self-portrait today. I don't have a ton of access to a bunch of other people to paint their portrait. I mean, I could use Jeremiah, but I think I've painted Jeremiah like more than I've painted any single person, because he's just there and he's not me, so it's like easier to have somebody else paint them, practice on them. And so I don't want to do that because I've already painted him quite a bit, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last time, you know. I'm sure I'll paint him again, but today we are going to be doing a self-portrait. And I went and I took some reference images, and by took reference images, I mean I set up my phone on my bookshelf and I just videoed myself in a few different angles and like positions, and then screenshotted and like chose the one that I thought would make the best composition. Also, I was very particular about the elements that I wanted in the reference image, because there's a few things that I want to improve in. I want to get better at painting hair. I have always struggled with painting hair and I felt like this would be a good opportunity to challenge myself in that. So in the reference image, it needed to have enough of my hair visible so that I could have ample opportunity to practice painting hair. The second thing was fabrics and different fabrics. So I have a velvet fabric for the top, and then the skirt is like a patterned fabric. And so those are 2 things that I felt like would either make interesting visual texture and also an interesting lesson for me to work through learning how to paint those very different fabrics. The other thing is I wanted to make sure that a hand was visible at some point in the reference image. The very first oil painting portrait I ever did was a self-portrait, and it was, I did have my hand in it, and I felt like that became my favorite part of the painting. And I also felt like I haven't done a self-portrait in a while, and it might be fun to compare the self-portrait I did when I was very first learning to now, which is, I think, about 3 years ago is when I painted that portrait. We'll see how much I have improved over the last 3 years. So hands, fabrics, hair, and ears. I wanted to have an ear, and I know that this is making me sound crazy, like hands and ears and all of that, but the last couple portraits I painted, the one that I did of my husband, and then the master copy that I did, the ears ended up being like my favorite part of the composition. There was something about the folds of the ear. It's just such a weird shape, and it comes with all of these different colors that you use that you wouldn't think that you'd use. And so I wanted to paint that as well into this. So that's how I landed on the specific position that I positioned myself in, so that all of those elements were visible. And I think that it will make both an interesting composition, and I think that it will help me learn. And really, that's all this is. It's an exercise in learning to become a better portrait artist. So let's get that started. All right, as we're getting this underpainting going, I just wanted to note kind of my thought process here. I decided to tone the canvas and then put a grid over that and then sketch in my composition on top of that. The reason I toned the canvas this time is because when you paint on a toned canvas, it can help you get the values more accurately from the beginning, and I really wanted to give myself any leg up I could when doing this portrait. My goal was that I would get this portrait done within 2 weeks, having 1 week of working on it, like in between doing a landscape video, and then having a second week be completely dedicated to this portrait. And because I haven't painted a portrait in quite a long time, I wanted to make sure that I had as much time as possible to get it done in a way that was satisfactory. As I have been working on this portrait, there came a point during the process where I felt like I wanted to try a different tactic. And so I did go back and I started a second portrait, like right in the middle of it. And I think I'm gonna make a part 2 video on that, because if I put the second portrait I painted into this video, it would be probably like 40 minutes long. So I'm splitting it into 2 videos. And next week I will show you the different method I used to begin the portrait and how they differ between each other. And honestly, after working on that second portrait, I felt like it was more successful, at least from the beginning. This portrait, it took me a while to kind of get into it. I think that when I was blocking in the colors, it felt very gray and very flat. And so I was kind of hoping to get a little bit more volume to my shapes from the get-go, versus kind of what I had here where it was very flat, and then I let that dry and I built more layers on top of it. And eventually I get to a place where the shapes feel more rounded, but in the beginning, I was struggling more with getting the desired effect. Also, at the beginning part here, for a while now, I've had this issue where when I speed my videos up, it creates these lines that run up and down on my screen, and so you can see that here at the beginning part. But I did actually fix that in this video, so those won't be here the whole time. Like somewhere in the beginning-ish portion here, I fix it and it doesn't do that anymore. So yay, yay for that. The other thing is that it took me a while to get the proportions on this down, which honestly, I feel like putting a grid down and then sketching in my reference over that usually gets me pretty close. But for this painting specifically, I was having trouble positioning all of the features properly. And so you'll see that I do kind of move them around quite a bit in these early stages, which is totally okay. I think that the wonderful thing about oil paint is that it is very malleable and you can move it and you can shape it differently. And can be a curse that it doesn't dry very quickly, but it also can be a blessing because it is forgiving, and in the sense that if you mess up, you can just kind of move it over a little bit, or you can wait for the paint to harden up a little bit and then just paint over it. So there's no mistake that you can't just fix with, a little bit of extra time and patience. I do move the shapes around quite a bit in this painting. Honestly, I haven't painted on a canvas this big in a while, which is so funny because when I was in college, literally my whole senior exhibit, I was painting on like 3 feet by 4 feet canvases, and I had like 6 of them. And so I was working on this huge scale. In the last year or so, I've been living in an apartment, and it's only until this point where we actually have enough space to be working on larger paintings. But having a bunch of big canvases is super impractical to move. And so I just haven't been working on larger canvases. And then on top of that, for this channel, I've been doing a lot of like end plein air paintings, and I've been doing those on really tiny canvases, like 5 inches by 7 inches, the last 2 ones I did. And that's so small. So anyway, going from like all these really small canvases I've been working on for a little while, right now, this canvas feels larger to me than it usually would. Once I got some of the base color in and let that paint dry up just a little bit overnight, I would apply a little bit of color and then I'd dry brush it out to help blend. And I feel like that's kind of where I find myself a lot with this painting, is looking at my reference image and then looking at my painting and seeing where there are spots that need to be worked on, and then adding color, brushing it out, adding color, brushing it out. One of the ways in which I find I use technology to my advantage is I have my iPad like off to the left there, and I'll take a picture of the painting that I'm working on, and then I have the reference image that I'm working off of on the iPad, and I'll just put the current image of my painting right next to that reference image on the iPad. I use Procreate for that. I just like set them up next to each other. And then I have them like super close so I can very easily see the differences between the reference and what I'm actually doing. And so I'm taking pictures a ton during this process of get a quick photo of where I'm at, put it next to the reference photo, see what the differences are, go back into the painting, change what needs to be changed, take a step back, observe what still, is maybe off about it, take another picture. That's just what I've been doing. Again, honestly, I'm not here to necessarily say that, like, this is how you should paint a portrait or whatever. It's more just like, here's what I've been doing, and I want to get better at it. And I think that it really only comes by just doing it. I have such a tendency when I'm doing painting projects to just want to paint the face the whole entire time and not focus on any other part of the painting. And I could not do that in this portrait because I did have a bunch of other variables that I really wanted to practice. And so eventually I do go down and I start, building out the patterned fabric a little bit more. I kind of felt like I wanted to approach the pattern in a more layered way. So like letting it just be simple and do a layer and then let that dry, and then kind of another layer on top of that, let that dry, another layer on top of that, let it dry, and hopefully I could get some depth with it. So, and then I don't go very far on the hands at first. When I do go move to the hands, I just kind of like brush them out and create some basic shapes and things like that. The velvet shirt as well, I'm using alizarin crimson, and if you've ever painted with that paint, it dries really slowly and it's also really sheer. And so that's another one where I laid down a layer of alizarin crimson and then I kind of let that set up for a little while, and then the next day I laid down another layer. And so I've been layering up this shirt quite a bit, and that I do have some like rough highlights to remind myself where they are, but eventually those do go away. Where I'm at right now, we're getting to a place where the skin is a little bit smoother, and yet it just lacks a certain volume and depth. Like it feels pretty flat still. So I do work quite a bit on, while I'm still perfecting the proportions, because here I'm definitely still getting the proportions of the nose to the chin nailed down. I really struggled with that area on this one. Sometimes, and honestly, there's like a couple portions of it where I kind of look like I've got the strongest jaw ever. But I really had to push and pull on this one and paint a little bit, take away a little bit, paint a little bit, take away a little bit, and just move the lips around just ever so slightly, and then the chin around ever so slightly, and the shadows. Eventually I get it to a place that I feel like is settled and looks good, but you'll notice that I mess with that specific area quite a bit. And same with the ear positioning. I feel like my ears are fairly small, and this ear looked very large compared to the head. So I go back in and I shrink that eventually. The ear I really don't mess with until the very end. Most of my work is done on the face and perfecting the face, because if the face is off, the whole portrait's going to be off. At least that's in my opinion. I feel like if I'm looking at the face and it doesn't look right, then it doesn't matter the rest of the portrait, you know. So the face needs to be good, and then all of the other variables will fall into place, even if there's little imperfections in the fabric or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I just spend my time layering up this piece. I painted in the hair in a way that I feel like I would do differently next time. I kind of started with some midtones and then glazed a darker, I think it was burnt umber. I glazed a darker burnt umber over it eventually. I feel like next time I'm going to start with the very darkest color and then build up lighter colors on top of that, which is a very traditional way of doing it, which is good because it works, you know? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think next time I will start with the darkest color and then build up slowly on top of that. But again, hair is one of those things that I really need to work on, and I have not cracked the code yet, but I will eventually. Someday I'll get there. You'll also notice as I'm going through this process that I bounce around quite a bit. Like, I'll work on the face, and then I'll work on the hand, and then I'll work on the hair, and then the shirt, and then the face again, and then the hair again, and then the shirt again. And it's not just, at least for me, it's not just, I don't just paint one thing and then move to the next thing. And I think that there are different schools of thought on this. Like, some people will just put an underpainting down and then they'll paint everything perfectly the first time, and there it is. But I find that bouncing around between all the different elements helps me create a more balanced painting, because then I can see how everything's progressing kind of evenly. Like, I build up the underpainting, and I build up the color blocking, and I build up all of the detail work, and as it all kind of comes together at roughly the same time, then I know that my elements are balanced. And so that's how I approached this painting as well. So now we get to the final painting. I feel like this was a painting where in the middle of the process, I was thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? Like, am I going to be able to finish this in time? And the answer was yes, I was able to finish it in time. And like I said earlier, I actually started a second portrait in the middle of painting this one that I thought about maybe putting in this video, but I think I am going to be putting in a part 2 of this video. And I was able to get almost done with that portrait as well within the 2 weeks that I set out for this painting. So I was able to complete quite a bit, which I felt very good about, because I really wasn't sure, you know, where I was going to be with this painting and how quickly I could work through this process, since I haven't done it in quite a while. Comparing this to my first portrait, I feel like I've really improved quite a bit. The proportions were kind of rough there for a minute, but comparing it to the portrait that I did 3 years ago, my quality of brush strokes is stronger. My blending is smoother. I feel like my choice of composition is improved. So yeah, I think it's just a little bit, it's kind of fun to just see the differences and see just how much better I've gotten, and that's just a fun little moment. With practice, we get better, and I definitely know I still have much farther that I could go on this painting as far as improving my own skills, and for now, I feel pretty solid about where this ended up. I was a little bit worried that I made her too small for the canvas, that there was too much negative space. I haven't made my mind up about that yet. I feel like she could have been a little bit bigger in the canvas and took up a little bit more space. But at the same time, I feel like an argument could be made for the fact that having that negative space around her does create a little bit more of a statement, in that she's given space to breathe, and having that space around her gives the painting a different mood than if it was really close up. And having her farther away did make it so that I could get all of the elements that I wanted to work on in there. As for the elements that I wanted to practice for this, I don't feel like I'm fully there with the hair yet, but I definitely am better than I was before. And that is a good takeaway, because I was worried about having the hair feel too stiff, and I actually don't feel like this feels that stiff for me. I think that it lacks detail, and that's something that I'm still going to be working on, creating like a unified look to all of the colors that are used in the hair. I feel like could be better. And maybe if I had more time on this painting, I would let this dry and do some glazing and do some like sheer layers over the hair to kind of unify the colors a little bit more in certain spots. But overall, I feel like it doesn't feel super stiff to me, and the edges are pretty soft, which is something that I've picked up more recently. So I like that, and I feel like that is an improvement. And I know that I have dreams of where to go next, but I'm satisfied with how this turned out in the end. With the fabrics, I feel like they do feel kind of flat to me, but I don't think it matters too much when I look at the composition as a whole, because it's not necessarily like, we don't want every element to be the focal point here, you know? So I'm satisfied with where they are for the purpose that they serve. The pattern ended up being really fun to paint, and so is the velvet. And honestly, I feel like that's the biggest takeaway for me on the fabrics for this painting, was that it was just fun. Like, I had a good time figuring out how to paint these fabrics, and so that's good enough for me for now. The hand ended up being one of my favorite parts of painting this painting. The hand and the ear are very similar in that they are made up of these very peculiar shapes, and therefore you're creating these different shadows and different highlights and things than you would if it was just like the cheek, which is a big flat plane of color, you know, and the blending is just completely different on like the cheek rather than all of the little grooves of the hand or grooves of the ear. And so those always end up being my most favorite parts to paint, because it feels like a different sort of puzzle. And so I'm actually pleased with how they turned out. And then it did take me a little bit to get the proportions down, but I feel overall very satisfied with how it ended up. The quality of my blending is so much better now than it has been in the past, and I've definitely taken lessons from previous paintings, like the master copy I did and like the painting I did of my husband last year. And it's just a good testament to the fact that when you practice, you do get better, and it is a beautiful, sometimes slow, but worthwhile process to just improve your skills. And I know I have my whole life to get better at doing this, and I really look forward to seeing what my future paintings come out as. That is a wrap for this painting. Like I said before, I did start another painting. The next painting I'm doing, the reference photo for it was taken in the same photo shoot as this one, but it is a different vibe. It's more of a close-up portrait, like a classic, like shoulders and up kind of portrait. And I'll go into more of my process on it in the next video, but it is going to be a part 2 to this video. So if you enjoyed part 1, stick around for part 2. I'm so glad that you're here and that you're engaging in art with me, and it just means so much to me. So thank you so much for being here. If you had fun painting with me today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one.